Welcome, everyone, to the Game Disc Podcast, where every week we discuss the past, present, and future of the video game industry, including the top 100 games of all time. I'm your host, Simon Esty, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Noah Esty.
And today, last week, Noah and I walked past the burning building that was Xbox, so we're going to kind of loop around and revisit that. And then for our top 100 games of all time discussion, we're diving into Metroid Fusion. Is it one of the best games ever made? We will get to all of that. But first, Noah, how are you doing today?
Alright, but I do have a question for you, if you don't mind.
I'm scared, but go for it.
No, it's not. It's just a good, some might call it an ethical dilemma. I wouldn't go that far, but no, it's just a quick little question.
Okay.
Alright. Top 5 greatest rappers of all time, and they can't all be Pitbull. You can have Pitbull as one of them, but they can't all be Pitbull. Top 5 rappers, go.
I mean, I don't really listen to rap, but I would say coming in at number 5, Pitbull.
Really? Number 5?
Number 4, I'd probably have to do Pitbull. Number 3, I'd probably go Pitbull.
Okay.
Number 2,
don't fucking say it. Don't say it.
Probably Lil Nas X.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. Yep.
And then number 1, probably 50 Cent, but not the real 50 Cent, only the version of 50 Cent from the PS2 classic 50 Cent Blood on the Sand.
Okay, I guess that's fair. I mean, for me, I don't know who Lil Nas X is, so I'd probably just bump up the number 3 person to number 2, and I just gotta slightly disagree on the 50 Cent, so I'd probably just swap him out with Pitbull, in my opinion. Number 5, because there's an open spot, I think I'd probably put in Mr. Worldwide, but that's just me personally.
Nah, it's not a bad list.
Yeah, no, not at
anyway,
all. What about you, Simon? How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Just ran some errands. My to keep it video game themed, my GameCube died. The laser in it went out, so I had to drop that at the doctor. So they said they'll call me in 3 to 5 days, and hopefully I'll have a GameCube that is good as new, and then I can play all kinds of cool games like Shadow the Hedgehog and I don't know, Soul Calibur 2, I guess.
Yeah, when you said keep it video game themed, I thought you were going to be like, so yeah, I did some side quests.
I did do some side quests. I ran some errands. No, I got my GameCube hopefully fixed. Hopefully it's just the laser. I think it is, because it works totally fine. It just doesn't read games.
Nice.
So, something that is maybe can't be fixed is Xbox. So Noah, last week
that was a good one. That was a good transition.
Thanks. Last week we had a story that pretty much came out because we recorded a little late. We recorded Sunday night on California time, which meant I think it was just Gordon. No, it was somebody else. Somebody at The Verge posted an article basically saying how a lot of Xbox first-party games were going to come to Switch and PlayStation. And you and I were fairly... I don't know what the right word is, but I guess if I had to pick one, I'd say reasonable. You and I were pretty reasonable in how we thought that this might go down and why we thought Xbox, or Microsoft, I guess, might be doing this. What I didn't really expect was when I got online the next morning and people started actually checking stories and seeing that this was happening, and that the internet was on fire and people were freaking out saying this is the death of Xbox. Sony's going to have a monopoly. Microsoft is completely pulling out of gaming and all this and now they're the biggest third-party publisher. This all kind of came out Monday. As we've gone through the week, things have calmed down a little bit. But the idea is basically people's concerns are if all these games are coming to PlayStation and Switch, then what's the point of having an Xbox? And to kind of add fuel to the fire, Phil Spencer did post a tweet saying, we heard you. We're going to have a business meeting next week, which a lot of people are saying, well, he didn't outright deny any of the rumors, so they're probably true. And that's probably not completely unreasonable to think. The kind of, and I know I'm talking for a while now, I'm just kind of getting
No,
everything
go
caught up
ahead.
because
I
I don't
mean,
know how much you.
inform the audience. Inform the audience.
Right now, the working theory is, because unrelated to this, there is a leak by Nate the Hate, I think, who is pretty good about Nintendo
Nathan
stuff,
Drake.
saying, yeah, sure, saying Nintendo's going to have a direct on February 15th. So the working kind of theory from a lot of people is that Nintendo is going to announce Hi-Fi Rush for the Switch at their Nintendo Direct, and after that is when Microsoft will hold this press conference or something, basically saying all their games are, or not all their games, but some of their games are coming to PlayStation and Switch. And again, the working theory is that it will be a case-by-case basis, but we don't know how true that actually is, because the big game that a lot of people think is Indiana Jones. And this one is, what makes it a little complicated is because this is a Bethesda game, and it would make sense for those to be multi-platform. And obviously, Microsoft now owns Activision Blizzard. Those are going to be multi-platform. So we still don't know, is something like Avowed going to come to PlayStation? And even if it does, is it going to be day and date? There's just a lot of questions, and until we get kind of that meeting with Phil Spencer, I just don't know what we're going to do. But I understand people being concerned. But Noah, what do you kind of... Yeah. What do you think?
I think that it's something, yeah, we did talk about this a little last week. I don't think it would be the worst idea for Microsoft to. So Game Pass has been the thing that it's been their bread and butter. That is why you buy an Xbox these days. You buy it because Game Pass is arguably the best deal in gaming right now, and you want access to that. So with that being said, I wouldn't be too surprised if they would are pretty much seeing if they can get Game Pass on the Switch or the PlayStation. It would be difficult, but it might be something they would be looking into. It's pretty well known by this point that a lot of companies lose money on their products, and they lose money on the consoles, make it up for it through software sales. I wouldn't be too surprised if Microsoft was just like, hey, we're spending a lot of money on these to get these games for Game Pass. Let's see if maybe we can put it on other systems and then we just don't have to make our own. But I don't think they're going to be completely out of the race just because they've been doing it for a while now. And even if sales aren't as good as they were, I don't think we're at the point where they're just going to drop it completely as of right now.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with any of that. I do think Microsoft needs to pivot. Whatever they're doing isn't working. One of the sort of pieces of evidence that was used as Microsoft just completely getting out of the hardware game is that the Series X has been on pretty deep discounts for like $350, and it's still just not selling at all. I think that I think the Xbox One S actually was selling more at this same period in its life, which that's not good. But I think that
No.
Microsoft still has, they've got a lot of things going for them. They do have Game Pass, which maybe that isn't profitable, who knows. But one thing that I think that they're in a really, really strong position is all of these manufacturers, Asus, Lenovo, MSI, they're all trying to make these handheld PCs. Microsoft could come out with one of those running some exclusive version of like Windows handheld and just dominate. And I think that that's hopefully what they pivot to, because I think that that's kind of where gaming's maybe going. We're starting to hit sort of like a critical mass in terms of how much better could the PlayStation 6 be than the PlayStation 5? I don't know.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying everybody's going to do that, but I think that Sony and Microsoft are definitely looking at what these other companies are doing. Asus, Lenovo, Steam, the Switch. They're looking at all these handhelds and they definitely see a market there. And I think that Microsoft is in a unique position to capture that if they play their cards right, which is something that the Xbox brand hasn't been able to do. But I'm hoping that they turn it around, and I mean, we'll see. And clearly Sony's interested in it. That's why they came out with that stupid PlayStation Portal thing. So, I mean, we'll see if they come out with like a PlayStation Vita or 4 or whatever. But I don't know. What do you're kind of like,
Yeah,
you don't think so?
and mean, no, I definitely do think so. I think
Hmm.
that Microsoft has never had a portable console before, and if that is where the gaming market's going, because let's just simplify it, Steam and Nintendo, they both have consoles that are just on the go portable, you can play games, and it would make sense for all of these other ones that are essentially like the mini computers, like you mentioned. It would make sense for Microsoft, aka the company who's running the operating system a lot of those portable like computers are using. It would make sense for them to try to get in it as well. And along with that, for me personally, when I first saw those things, I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool," but it's kind of like a Steam Deck. I don't It's kind of like for me when I saw it, I thought, "Oh, it's kind of like an off-brand Steam Deck." And even though that's not the case,
Yeah,
that was my initial reaction. But if Microsoft comes out with one and they advertise it as this is essentially a mix between a computer and a gaming console, I think that that could prove very well for them. And even though there would be similar products to it, it's definitely a way for Microsoft to. I definitely believe they would gain a large portion of that of that market just on the basis of we're fucking Microsoft.
yeah. I agree with all of that. And kind of one thing you mentioned about sort of these other products being knockoffs. I don't think so. A lot of people really
I don't
like
think so
the
either. No, I don't think so
yeah,
either.
but to your point, a lot of people prefer the ROG Ally to the
Hmm.
Steam Deck because it
Hmm.
has a little bit more functionality because it is running Windows. But at the
Yeah.
same time, a lot of people say the biggest issue with this is that it is running a full version of Windows, and it is obviously by nature of it being handheld a little weaker. So if Microsoft can capitalize that and say, here's Windows 11H for handheld or something, I mean, that's a lot of problem solved. That's not only a real Steam Deck competitor in a way that we haven't seen, but that could maybe put Microsoft or Sony on their toes. Like, why should I pay $600 or whoever how much the PlayStation 6 is going to cost when I can play games handheld on this Xbox device for a little bit less? So, yeah, I think that I think a pivot by Microsoft is necessary. I don't think if they choose to just totally forgo whatever the next console is, I don't think that's a bad thing as long as they're still doing something. So, one more question before we move on from Microsoft, Noah. If what game do you want on your Switch or PlayStation the most?
Probably Hi-Fi Rush. That's the game that is kind of what this whole thing is rumored about, and that's the game I'm definitely most interested in just because it's unique, it's got a really fun, interesting art style, it's bright and colorful. Most games these days are either anime or they're realistic, so yeah, it seems like, something that I'm very interested in playing.
Yeah, for me, it's I want Pentiment on the Switch. That seems like the perfect place for that game.
Oh, that would be a good game for, Switch.
Yeah, one.
But
Well, some people who may not be releasing any games on the Switch are Toys for Bob. They had a bit of a scare because Microsoft closed their office in the Bay Area last week. They also
Mhm.
laid off 86 employees, which this is a smaller studio, so that was like half. I think there's 79 employees left. So a lot of people took this to mean that Microsoft was completely dissolving Toys for Bob. We still don't know exactly what's happening. For right now, the remaining employees are still employed, but we don't know if they're just fully remote now, if they're going to get absorbed into some other studio at Microsoft, if they're maybe going to just do further cuts down the line. We don't know, but as of right now, their physical office is closed. And that's a bummer. Toys for Bob they've made a lot of pretty good games. Most recently, I think they came out with that Crash 4, which a lot of people loved. And a lot of people were hoping that they just come out with a new Spyro game. And so the fact that they kind of got sucked into the Call of Duty machine was bad enough. And now that they might just be gone is an even bigger travesty. So I'm hoping that they're not. I'm hoping that they stick around, and it's just layoffs, which are unfortunate, but it's better than a complete death of a studio. But what are you thinking, Noah?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping they keep them around. It's one of those things that whenever you are doing anything in business, always want to diversify your portfolio. And Toys for Bob, kind of, in my opinion, they were like a double A studio. They did a lot of remasters. They did the new Crash Bandicoot game. Seems like they were kind of a double A studio, and not a bad idea to have one of those around, especially for Game Pass,
Yeah.
just so then that way you get some more content on that. But if Microsoft is planning on easing out of hardware, I guess it would make sense for them to not want to focus too much on that content, on that. And there's a couple different ways of looking at it. If they did want to completely get out of the video game console market, focus entirely on Game Pass, would make sense for them to keep Toys for Bob, because then that way it's, hey, you want to play Spyro 4? Gotta get Game Pass in order to play it. But at the same time, they did just buy Activision and Blizzard, and given that a couple years ago they bought some companies as well, maybe they just don't really feel the need for a double A studio, which
Which would
hopefully
be
in that case.
absolutely wild. Could you imagine like the two biggest like best reviewed Xbox games since like the Series X launched were Hi-Fi Rush and Pentiment, which are like small
the
games. It's like if you have a strength, Microsoft, it's small games. But yeah, let's get rid of half of a studio who could put out a cheaper game. Yeah,
yeah,
again,
and
like I said, the Microsoft, if there's one thing they're good at, it's not making the right decision.
no, I can't remember. With the exception of Game Pass, I don't really remember many good ideas Microsoft has done. Connect
No.
failed. Connect's the big blunder. I guess usually Microsoft gets one idea and that carries them for a long time. First it was Xbox Live, now it's Game Pass.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they got lucky with, Sony making a big mistake with the PS3. But somebody
Totally.
who is hoping to not make a big mistake is Disney, because they have invested $1.5 billion stake into Epic Games. They're essentially hoping to create their own little metaverse using Fortnite, which would obviously include popular Disney properties such as Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, and Avatar. I think that this is a very like corporate business guy not understanding the market and hearing that video games make money and thinks, well, let's just what's a video game that's big? Fortnite. Okay, let's just throw money at that, and that'll be our video game thing.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, I hope if it'll probably pay off if you can kind of get your own little metaverse. Fortnite's kind of created its own metaverse more than any other tech company, anyway. You
Mhm.
know, in terms of they came out with that Lego game and they have their own rock
Mhm.
band, and I'm sure like if you own a Spider-Man skin in Fortnite, you'll be able to wear that in this Disney thing. So as far as what all these tech bros were saying the metaverse would be, where you could buy a sword in Skyrim and take it with you into Call of Duty, Fortnite's actually probably the one game who could do that. So it makes sense that Disney would kind of want to get some of that. But at the same time, there's a part of me that kind of wish that they would just take that 1.5 billion and put it into ramping up some studios, and we just get, some kind of interesting Marvel and Star Wars and even Avatar games. And I guess we're getting those things anyway, but yeah, I don't know. This doesn't really. I like Star Wars. I like Marvel. This doesn't excite me at all.
Yeah. First of all, didn't like your transition. Transition should have been. Speaking of bad decisions, then
No,
got
because
into that.
I don't think this is a
Second of
bad
all,
decision. I think this will probably make Disney a lot of money. I just don't care about it at all.
yeah, I think that's the epitome of it. It's okay, cool. It's it's big business doing big business. That's pretty much the best way to look at it. I think it's boring. Like
Yeah.
you pretty much hit the nail on the head. It's the cool thing would be giving that money to smaller studios and having them built up. That'd be cool if we got more games like Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Love that game. I'm really enjoying it. And it would be cool if they started leasing out those IPs and giving some really big budgets to make a lot of AAA games for their IPs. But at the same time, let's really look at it this way. A
Well,
lot
they
of
kind of are
their
doing that though.
movies, yeah, but let's look at it this way, and this is kind of my perspective. A lot of their movies haven't been doing that great lately. And the thing that they really can do well, though, is merchandising. That's where I feel like a lot of their money's really coming from these days. And I feel like Fortnite is so big that their partnerships with Epic is kind of a way of merchandising. So even though we may not be getting more products necessarily associated with this, I believe that this can make them a lot of money. And it might be boring, but by the end of the day, as long as you turn a profit, that's what matters most.
Yeah. I just hope that this isn't, because one thing that I do kind of think you're wrong about is you did say, well, you weren't really wrong about it, but Disney's strategy has been to lease out their IP, right? Just
Yeah.
last year alone, we got Spider-Man 2, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Avatar. The year before that, we got, I don't know, it was Guardians last year. Like, we've been getting pretty good.
Guardians, I think, was a couple years ago.
Yeah, we've been getting, and then even this coming year, we've got Star Wars Outlaws. Oh, and we got that Disney game, Illusion Island. We've been getting a lot of Disney games, and so I guess as long as they keep doing those, and those are well received, I'm fine with that. But I also wouldn't have minded if maybe, yeah, they kind of spun off their own studios, and then they didn't have to license out their stuff. But regardless, like I said, I think they'll make a lot of money, much like Nintendo has made a lot of money because they had an investor call and they gave some updates. I'll go through this pretty fast because do you know what you just did? Thank you. You just I was about to start about to start reading my notes and they just disappear from the document. I'm like, okay, I guess we're not talking about the Switch, Noah. You are staging a coup.
Yeah, no, I mentioned earlier, I was like, oh, that would be kind of cool if Microsoft made its own console. We're not talking about the Switch. The age of the Switch is over. We're talking about the age of the Microsoft Extra, which is for an extra way to play your games on the go. So,
Sure.
yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Anyways,
Breaking
back
news.
to the Switch.
Phil Spencer himself listening to this podcast now, being like, "Oh shit, we're doing that? Oh, all right. I didn't know that, but I guess so. If that's what we're doing."
Write this down.
Okay.
Yeah, that you just completely derailed me. Switch has sold 132. Here's just kind of the
Just like what
brief
the
notes from
extra's
it.
gonna do to the gaming
No,
industry.
the Switch has sold 132 million units. This puts it in third place for the most sold units for a console ever. The DS was in second place with 154 million, and the PS2 was in first place with 158 million. They did raise financial forecasts for the Switch, so they think it'll keep selling a little bit more. I I don't think it'll really beat either of those. It might, but if the Switch 2 comes out this year, that's probably not likely. A couple of other little tidbits. Tears of the Kingdom has sold 20.3 million units. Super Mario Wonder has sold 12 million units. And the most successful game on the Switch was Mario Kart Deluxe, which sold 57 million units. Yeah, pretty. So Switch is still selling pretty well, even though it's a 7 going on 8-year-old piece of tech. So yeah, good on Nintendo. You have anything to say about that, or
Not really. I mean, it feels like every couple of weeks we talk about a new sales record Switch does, and I feel like we've kind of pretty much said everything really to say. Switch doing great, Nintendo's doing great. Good for them.
yep?
But you know who else is doing great these days, Simon?
You can tell me.
Fighting game fans. Fighting
They are.
games for lately, we've had some very good fighting games. And to kick off how all these great fighting games, EVO 2024 lineup just got announced. The main
It did.
stage is games going to include Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8, Guilty Gear Strive, Mortal Kombat 1, King of Fighters 15, Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising, Under Night EX M Birth 2, Cis Celeste, and Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. They are going to be at a new location. Evo has always been Evo or Battle at the Bay. Really has been in Las Vegas for a long time, still is, but they're now being located to the west hall of the Las Vegas Convention Center, and both the show floor, artist alley, and the publisher booths will be available for all 3 days. Whereas historically, most of those things have only been around for Friday and Saturday. So, Simon, what would you like to talk about for the main stages games? Because you were a little surprised when you saw those games, correct?
Yeah, I think it's a shit lineup. I
Boo!
think that this is the worst. If you were to pick a list of fighting games, I don't think you could pick a worse list, because I don't know why would you pick Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8 when Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 came out last year, and so did Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm, Boruto Ultimate Connection, Saga X Cross D. Those are just real fighting games. I don't know what these games
Yeah,
are. No,
a
but no.
Jujutsu Kaisen game just came out too. They should have added that.
Oh yeah, Cursed Clash. Yeah, this is
Yeah, yeah, that one.
a garbage list. No, in all seriousness, I think, I mean, a lot of these make sense. I was surprised by Under Night X in Birth to Cis Celeste, which I feel dirty saying. Because I thought Fighter Z was still pretty
Well,
big, but I guess not. So the other ones, nothing else on here really surprises me.
yeah. Well, I mean, the cool thing is, it's really great that you feel dirty about pronouncing that title. It is French bread, and French bread games, they are known for being considered, they're not poverty fighters, but they were famous for being played in the bathrooms at video game tournaments. So, I mean, if you feel dirty saying it, just think it matches the aesthetic of the bathroom.
You probably feel dirty playing it.
And I think it's a great lineup. It really is just, this is what is big in the fighting game community right now. You got Under Night, which is the big anime fighter, or not the big anime fighter, but it's kind of that niche, the anime fighter, replacing, of course, Melty Blood. And then you have Grand Blue Fantasy versus Rising, which is like the big anime fighter in my opinion, and it's great, really just fulfilling every corner of the fighting game community with this. And even though Third Strike isn't big at the moment, Evo always does include a kind of throwback retro title, or it has been in the past couple of years. Last time it was Marvel vs. Capcom 2, so this is kind of the next thing. The throwback game is going to be Street Fighter Third Strike, which really hoping that really hoping we get a. I'm sure that there will be at least several people trying to recreate Evo Moment 37, and that would be great if we could have a Daigo versus Justin Wong rematch.
Yeah, that'd be cool, but it'd be cooler if they were playing Nickelodeon All-Star Brawls 2 that has Avatar and Cat Dog.
I can guarantee Daigo, if he tried playing that game, he would just be super confused. Justin would also be confused, but I feel like he might be able to get a handle on it just because he plays so many random like fighting games, whereas Daigo is pretty much an exclusively Street Fighter player, and so he might be a little confused as to what's going on, but regardless, yeah, that would be cool. By the way, did you hear they just announced Mr. Krabs as DLC?
No, because I don't actually care.
I will say that this is the thing that I find this the craziest part about that. If we lived in a world where Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, the series, did not exist, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, any game that includes one of them would have the other three playable. The Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl is the only video game in history where some but not all of the turtles are playable.
Yeah, that's because the game was kind of. I know a lot of people like it, but the game's kind of whack. But we've been talking about it for long enough. We still got 2 more news stories, so just get us right into the next one. Noah, we'll keep this brief.
Okay. Which, yeah, we're gonna try to keep this brief because Anyway, that was a cool recovery, wasn't it, Simon?
Yeah.
No, we're gonna try to keep it brief. I say as I wasted like 12 minutes with that little
and you're still doing
sketch.
It. So
yeah, okay, I'll keep it brief. We don't have a lot of time, both during this podcast and on this earth. And that is something that Hideo Kojima really realized as he discussed that in 2020 he had an encounter with a deadly illness that involved him needing to undergo surgery, and for that reason what's ligma?
Kojima got ligma balls.
Classic. Anyway, though, going back to more serious topics such as death, Kojima, he mentioned that he did have to battle ligma. Okay, no, that was disrespectful. That was bad. I'm sorry. He did have a battle with a deadly illness, and he really realized how finite his time is, and so he kind of wants to do everything he can. A lot of people have been wanting him to return to the stealth espionage genre, and that is why he's announced Physint. And the only reason I really wanted to talk about this is because last week on the podcast we talked about how Kojima's been a little overexposed, and I think this really kind of explains that. He claimed that this was the lowest point of his life, and it makes sense for him to now be like, I really want to do everything I can before I have to leave. And this is his way of doing that, which I say, you know what? If that's really where all this is coming from, I don't mind him being a little overexposed then.
Yeah, and my issue was never that he was overexposed. My issue was if he's got Death Stranding 2, which is over a year out, and then he's
Mhm.
got Overdose, which is who knows how much time out, and then he's got Fizzant, which is even further out than that. I don't mind that he wants to make all these things. I think that's cool. I just I don't know, maybe wait until you've got something to show for these games, because the way I see it is Fizzant in particular is so far out that game might just never get made. But I do think it's
Mhm.
cool that Kojima realizing he will most likely one day die is how we're getting him to revisit the stealth genre. Because he's only got so much time left on this earth,
Yeah, he's
which
like
brings us
over
to our feel good
60.
story. Yeah, which brings us to our feel good story, because whereas Kojima wants to cram as much achievements into his life as he can, Yoko Shimomuro has already done that because the GDC will be presenting her with a Lifetime Achievement Award. She got her career started at Capcom, where she was a composer for pretty popular games like Street Fighter 2, which is not at EVO, Final Fight, which is also not at EVO, and The King of the Dragons, which is definitely not at EVO. And then after she did the music for those, she went over to Square Enix and did music for Final Fantasy series, Kingdom Hearts, Live Alive, and Parasite Eve, which none of those are at EVO either.
Mm. As
Yeah,
far
I
as
mean
we're
that's
aware.
yeah. I mean yeah, that's all of those games that I just said have some of the best music ever made. So if anybody deserves it for being a composer, it's this woman, which is I didn't realize she was a woman worked on those games until I was reading the
Yeah.
article, and that's kind of wild because that would have been like the 80s and 90s. So good for her.
Yeah, and I feel like it's one of those things where in the past there was a lot of women in random position in game development, usually associated with like music, and it's really interesting how they just aren't really talked about. It's it's awesome that they were able to do it and that they built careers. I mean, just think, a woman created Guile's theme. Like
But did a
that's
woman create
that is one
Ken's
of
theme?
yeah, it's
Then that's cool. I
just
think
some
Ken's theme is better.
I um I
Ken's, Ken's theme is better.
I mean, that's a discussion,
And that's
but
I guess people
speaking
can be
of
wrong.
yeah, by the way, not related to her, Capcom is doing a thing called Capcom Super Election. Just a quick little survey
Oh yeah, I did
for
that.
if you want. Oh, you did it?
Yeah, I meant to text you about it. My
Oh,
bad.
well, I did it too. So it's just one of those things. Capcom does this pretty often, just kind of like, hey, what Capcom games do you like? What Capcom games do you kind of want to see more of? So go onto Capcom's Town Hall website and should be able to fill it out. So yeah, something I was interested is they were like, what new game entry would you be interested in seeing? And Rival Schools was on there, so I was like, yep, definitely would like to see a new Rival Schools game. Or a port or something.
Yeah, I know a lot of Japanese companies do this from time to time. If it's anything like Atlas, we'll get to fill out about 400 of these, and then we'll finally get Persona on Switch.
Oh,
All
by the
right, so
way, real
that's all.
quick, saw an
What?
advertisement. Atlas is apparently hiring in Japan, so if anybody's in Japan and wants a job, maybe you can apply to Atlas.
There you go. All right,
That was
ready to
cool.
go into our game of the week.
Yes, I am. Are you ready?
Only if you are. So we are. Sorry, I just realized something. I'm okay. So this week we're talking. Last week we spun the wheel and we got a Game Boy Advance game. So we're talking about Metroid Fusion. As per usual, we will say what we like, what we don't like, and who we'd recommend it to before we go into full spoilers for the game. So Noah, Metroid Fusion, what do you like? What do you not like? Who would you recommend it to? Go.
I like how this was one of the first big Game Boy Advance releases. That's I guess that's not about the game necessarily, but I like the gameplay. It was a fun, maybe not the newest take on Metroid, but it was a good quality Metroid handheld game, and I would say it's for fans of SNES/GBA styled games. Who is it not for? Maybe for older fans who who don't really appreciate those kinds of games, or ones who just want something a bit more modern, or maybe even something a bit different.
Yeah, I kind of agree with all that. I would recommend it to people who want a pretty good Metroidvania that is I
Mhm,
would say at this point it's a classic Metroidvania. It's on the other side of that because it is a game that you can sometimes get stuck or lost, which is
mhm.
part of the fun of it. So if you don't really enjoy that, I would not recommend this game to you. And as for oh, I guess I kind of did that. I did it wrong. There you go. I said what I liked. I like how it's classic. I don't like how you can get lost or stuck, and I would recommend it to people who are fine with those things and who aren't fine with those things. Sorry, I'm trying
Yeah,
to open
and
up our wheels because I realized
no,
our wheel.
you answered that question in like a very good way too. It wasn't structured, but you answered it without people even knowing. If you didn't call attention to it, it would have been just poetry right there. But anyway,
Oh
so with
man,
that in
sorry, I was
mind,
distracted because I was yeah, I was trying to open our wheels, which I realized I didn't have open. Anyway, all right, so with that being said, we're going to go full spoiler territory. So if you don't want to know how a game from 2002 ends or what happens in it, then we'll see you next week where we'll talk about something else. So I actually played this game for the first time like 3 or 4 years ago. So this game, I did play it not when it first came out, and I think it holds up pretty well. But what about you, Noah?
Mhm.
Do you
So
remember
full
it at all? You played it when
disclosure,
it came out.
yes, I did. I was about 8 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So wait, 2012 or 2002, right?
You'd have been like 6.
Yeah, I was 6 at that time. So I played it. I really liked it. I did, however, get stuck on one part, and
Did
after
you beat it?
no, I never did because I got stuck,
Oh,
and I played it a lot. Even though I was stuck, I still played the game a whole lot, trying to figure out what to do, just because I really liked it. But alas, I never was able to complete the game. So my memory of the game is not as clear as yours, but I still remember it after all this time. I remember like the part where you're in the little morph ball and you see the infected Samus like walking below you. It's like, huh, that's weird. I thought I was Samus. So, yeah, it was a good game, but unfortunately I never was able to beat it.
yeah, that was kind of the one thing even though I played it fairly recently, that is the thing that sort of stood out to me is when you do run into like the clone Samus, how I guess terrifying it is. You do feel
Mhm.
like that creature is a threat and that it'll just manhandle you. And so every time she does show up, it's very tense, which is it's
Mhm.
almost gives the game like a survival horror feeling. And there's a couple of times where
Yeah.
yeah, like there's a section kind of towards the end of the game where the ship or the I guess facility that Samus is in loses power, so you kind of have to like creep through and you can't use elevators or anything. And yeah, and evil clone Samus is kind of stalking you the whole time, and it's just this really tense section because you know that you are outmatched. And I think that that was sort of the inspiration for the Emmys that are seen in Dread, who sort of
Mhm.
serve a similar function. But I think Fusion did it first.
Oh, I
And
and I at least sorry, I think Fusion may have done it a little better just because it's a Metroid game, lots of sounds, but then when you get to the part, at least with the introduction, it's very quiet and you just hear its footsteps, which I think is really cool for a Game Boy Advance game to do that. And so,
yeah, I was gonna say I
yeah.
think Dread actually does it a little better because
Oh,
I
really?
think most of the time with the clone Samus, Dark Sam is it Dark Samus? Is it
I thought
considered
Dark
Dark
Samus was
Samus? But
different.
Yeah, because that's Metroid
I
Prime
don't
2.
know. Yeah,
We'll just say
I
Clone Samus. I don't know what the actual term is, but
we'll
Clone
just say
Samus
Evil
most of the time,
Samus.
yeah, most of the time Clone Samus or Evil Samus shows up in cutscenes.
Mhm,
Whereas, and then there's a couple of boss fights, and those are good boss fights. Whereas I think the Emmys are integrated into the game a little bit better, where there are a lot more like rooms where you kind of have to think about. The Emmys almost serve as a puzzle, whereas Clone Samus is kind of this like plot device, if that makes sense.
yeah.
So while I do agree that it's a cool character and they did a good job of making it, does kind of the specter of Clone Samus looms over this game, making it kind of freaky and creepy in
Mhm,
general as far as gameplay goes. I don't know if it's as effective, which makes sense. This is a game. It is the fourth Metroid game after, yeah, the original, the Game Boy one, and then obviously Super Metroid. And this was
mhm,
kind of the closest one to like a modern one. Super Metroid still plays incredibly well,
mhm,
but this is a little bit different. It was for the Game Boy Advance, which is kind of it was a new generation of systems, but at the same time, you were losing two buttons, right?
mhm.
Because the Super Nintendo had four
Yeah.
face buttons, the Game Boy Advance only had two. So I think that they did have to make some compromises, and as far as like the controls go, and I think it
Mhm,
generally works pretty well. But as far as, and that's why I kind of have a hard time talking about this game because
mhm,
judged through, judged on its own, it's a fantastic game.
mhm.
But compared to Super
What came
Metroid,
before it?
not even what came before it, but even what came after with Zero Mission, I think that both of those games are better.
Mhm.
And I don't have you haven't played Zero Mission. Have you played Super Metroid?
So I played a little bit of both of them. I played a good amount of Super Metroid. I haven't played much of Zero Mission. I As a kid, I heard Zero Mission was essentially a remake, so I was like, "Oh, I don't want to play an old game. I want some of that new shit." So I
Yeah.
never I mean, I keep in mind I was like 6 or probably
Yeah.
by this point like 7 or 8. And so I didn't really get to play much of Zero Mission, and I did play some of Super Metroid, and that's kind of my issue when thinking about this game is this is a very good game, but how much is it just building off of the basis that was Super Metroid? And
Yeah.
I don't normally like to try to compare games, but there are times where it's important, and I think this is also why it is a little difficult to talk about handheld games because oftentimes they are building off of the basics of revolutionary games or icon I guess both revolutionary and iconic are fitting in a lot of instances.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I still think that there are plenty of handheld games which do deserve to be on the list,
Mhm,
but I think that Fusion is just kind of this weird game where it didn't it was a little more, I don't know if experimental is the right word, but it kind of focused on things that other Metroids generally don't. It is a game that you can get lost in and stuck in, but even then it's not quite as open as Super Metroid or Zero Mission. But
mhm.
it puts a much more emphasis on story, which isn't bad because I think the
No.
story in this game is actually pretty good for a Metroid
Mhm,
game. But at the same time, kind of like what we talked about last week with Doom, most of the time if you're playing a Metroid game, you don't really care about the story a whole lot. There's enough
mhm.
there to kind of keep you. I think Metroid has some interesting lore, but most of the time you do kind of just want to explore whatever facility Samus is stuck on this time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the best example of that, what was the most hated Metroid game?
Oh yeah, Other M, which famous for its story.
Yeah, exactly. What Metroid game has the biggest emphasis on its story?
Yeah, Other
Other
M.
M.
No, I agree. And I think that there's a reason for that. And part of it I think is just Other M story is bad
Yeah.
because Dread had some cool story moments too. But I
Mhm.
think Dread Dread did a better job of integrating those into the story, whereas I feel like Fusion tossed them in like more frequently, so
Mhm.
they break up the game a little bit more,
Yeah.
so it's harder to kind of get in that groove because so much of Metroidvanias is just getting in that groove and
Mhm.
learning where things are and kind of almost becoming addicted to just finding new secrets and
Yeah.
exploring new sections. And when you've
Mhm.
got these kind of lengthy story sections, which couldn't be skipped just because games didn't really let you do that at the time,
Mhm.
it did really break apart and it could kill some of that forward momentum, which
Mhm.
can already be tough in a game that you can get stuck in. So,
Yeah. So, yeah, and it's one of those things too where you want to just have fun. By the end of the day, that's why you play a game. You want to have fun, and
and this game is fun.
yeah, it's fun. But unfortunately, there are times that the game slows down, and it's a shame how there are times where it slows down on purpose, which is the story, and times where it slows down by accident, which is getting stuck on where to go.
Yeah. No, I agree. Boss fights are great though. I really like the when you fight Clone Samus, obviously. Um Kraden, Kragen, Kraid, just Kraid, I
Kraid,
guess. Yeah,
yeah,
Kraid.
big boy.
Yeah, he's always fun.
Mhm.
The final boss is pretty fun. It's yeah, it's and that's why this game is hard to talk about. It's not that it does anything bad, really,
Mhm.
minus the story kind of maybe sometimes interrupting, but even then the story is the best probably Metroid story or one of them.
Mhm.
It's more that other games just do everything a little bit better. And that's other Metroid games at least. And that's what makes this one, I think, kind of more of its that's its biggest sin. Not that it's bad
Mhm.
because it isn't. It's incredibly good. It's a
No.
great game. And if we're just being if we're not comparing it to itself, I think it definitely should be on the top 100 games of all time.
Mhm.
But I don't know if it makes sense to have a top 100 games of all time list with like every single Metroid because really like with the exception of Metroid 2 and I guess the original Metroid and other I think that most Metroid games are better than Fusion. And again, that's not saying Fusion's bad, but I think Super Metroid, Zero Mission, and maybe even Dread are all better than, and the Prime games are kind of better than Fusion.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be against having every game of one franchise on the top 100 list if I felt like they all did something to deserve it. But the issue is I feel like Fusion doesn't deserve it enough. It's a good game, yeah, and we've already pretty much said as long as a game does everything right enough, it can make the list. But I feel like Fusion's problem is it does everything right, but other Metroid games do it more right to the point that Fusion doesn't feel as unique or stand out. I
Yeah,
think that Fusion, the most unique part of Fusion, I'm going to be 100% honest, and this is going to be a hot take. The most unique part of Fusion is Samus's design. Prior to
I
that,
don't
Samus
think that's much
looked
of
the
a hot
same.
take.
Okay, well, prior to that, Samus had the exact same design, and so in Fusion they changed it up, and I think that is the thing that makes Fusion stand out the most compared to other Metroid games. And those little ball thingies too, those are also pretty cool, but that's why I like this game, but unfortunately it's like compared to some of the other Metroid games, it's like they did more for the genre and it's fun, but is it more fun than those other entries? And I personally don't really think it is.
No, I don't really think it is either. Even like Zero Mission, which came out just pretty soon after, I think
Mhm.
offers the player a little bit more freedom in terms of
Mhm.
just exploring the world and getting to do what they want to do and letting the player get lost a little bit. And then Dread, I think, is better in kind of that like railroad approach because that's kind of Fusion's biggest sin is that it doesn't commit either way. It's just like linear and railroady enough to not be super exciting to explore, but then
Mhm.
just open ended enough where you can get lost and stuck. and I think you kind of have to go one or the other because
Mhm.
like Dread is pretty railroady, so you don't really have to worry about getting lost, but you still it does a good job of making you feel like you're exploring. Meanwhile,
Mhm.
Zero Mission is like just go get lost. That's part of the fun,
Mhm.
and then obviously the Prime games are just and Super Metroid is I don't know. I think Super Metroid's the best one because it's got everything. It's the whole package.
Of
It's
course, best out of 2D Metroids because I feel like Super Metroid versus Prime, that could be a very big
yeah,
discussion.
yeah. I mean, we won't get into that because that is just
No.
whichever one you like more. But I
Wait,
personally
you
think I
mean on the podcast where we talk about Metroid Fusion, you don't want to hear this big argument about what's better, Super Metroid or Prime?
yeah, that's too much. That's like a Sophie's choice. We don't need to get into that. We don't have that much time. Yeah, kind of a shorter discussion, but the music's good, but even then, I don't think the music quite reaches the highs
Mm-mm.
of Prime or even Super Metroid. I will say the music is uniquely suited to Fusion,
Mhm.
being kind of what we talked about, this more sort of survival horror almost uh, theme or
Yeah.
feeling to the
Has
game.
a yeah, has a
I
horror has a hint of
tint.
horrorness.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
I
tint.
think that the music fits that. Like if you were to put this music in Zero Mission or Super Metroid, it wouldn't work. But in Fusion, I think it is perfect. It is perfect for Fusion. But again, personally, just prefer
Yeah.
Super Metroid and Prime's music a little bit more. And
Well,
that's again the game's biggest sin.
yeah. And I think the best example of that is the title menu. It's very like ominous and like a little haunting. It's and I think that I can remember that music very well. And as a kid, I didn't really think about game design or anything. But looking back on it now, it's like, oh yeah, that is a little creepy of a soundtrack. It would fit in very well with with Alien, and I think that's kind of what they were going for. And the music really did help with that.
Yeah. Nope. I agree. So you ready to call it, or is there anything else you want to say about
Yeah,
Metroid Fusion?
yeah, yeah. I think we're gonna call it pretty much. Yeah. So,
Okay.
Ira, yeah, go ahead.
Uh, yeah, I don't think it's any surprise. I don't think Metroid Fusion's getting on the list. Again, not that it's bad at all, because it's not. It's fantastic, and it is probably actually one of the best games ever made. But it's not as good as Zero Mission, which is similar. It's not as good as Super Metroid, which is similar. It's just yeah, like you said, it doesn't make sense to put a bunch if every game in a franchise did something unique, like Zelda or Mario, like those are all pretty good. Like every mainline Zelda game probably has a chance of getting on the list, but something like Metroid Fusion, which I just don't think does anything unique enough, I don't think it makes it.
Yeah, I mean, it was something we talked about with kind of that I mentioned with ports. It's a little difficult to really put them on the list because a lot of them are they kind of go off of what came before it. Like for I believe I'm pretty sure your favorite Game Boy Advanced game is Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, which is of course a remake of an SNES game. But then you compare it to something like Minish Cap, it's like Minish Cap was really good, and that might be able to make it the list, honestly.
Yeah.
Whereas Fusion doesn't. I don't really feel that way.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah,
So sorry, Metroid Fusion, but I mean we've already got Prime on there. I'm sure that we will add one other Metroid at least.
we
Uh,
doing Federation Force with this one, boys.
yeah, and other M's.
Oh yeah.
So with that being said, let's so we don't forget, spin our wheel.
Nope. All right.
Uh oh, whoops, I spun the wrong wheel first. Okay,
You blockhead.
I know. What the fuck? Why'd you do this?
Is it another PS4, PS5 game?
Yeah, okay, I'm shuffling it. I'm
You
shuffling it.
really need to check that wheel. Something is up. Something is up. You really need to just
Oh, come on,
before
just a
the
little bit further,
podcast.
a little bit further. No, man. Okay, fine.
What is it?
It's N64, PS1, Dreamcast, PC. Let's spin
Oh,
the
okay.
platform wheel. God, I hope it's not PC. That's gonna be hard. That that wasn't a spin.
What happened?
It just
Did
like
it
it
just
like
like barely
bore.
move?
Okay, cool. We're gonna talk about a Dreamcast game.
Oh, that should be fun.
Yeah, there's quite a few we can pull from. Full disclosure, we
Yeah.
didn't own a Dreamcast, so we'll probably just have to do like a GameCube port of a Dreamcast. But um,
Or we might do an arcade game that had a very successful Dreamcast port.
that's probably pretty likely too. Cool. All right. So yeah, next week we'll talk about a Sega Dreamcast game, and that'll be fun. One more thing before we get out of here. Just a quick follow up to our game draft where Noah, you drafted Helldivers 2, and
Yep.
that game has come out. Because that is a live service game, it looks like reviews aren't in yet.
Mhm.
So there's no score, so we won't know that. We'll check it next week. If there's no score for Helldivers 2 next week, we'll probably just have you pick a new game because I don't know if it will get a score.
Well, I think it will
I
because
think it will too.
there are reviews in progress, and that's something that's kind of it actually has a score on Metacritic, but Metacritic they don't give it a score until four different review outlets review the
Yeah, and
game.
it's only got like one. It's
Yes,
got two.
exactly.
It's
It's
got
got
an
one.
80.
Yeah, so but we can't put it on right now. So, yeah, I mean, worst case scenario, I'll just swap it with Foam Stars. They're essentially the same game from what I hear.
Yeah, I wonder if Foam Stars does have a.
Yes, it does. I'm looking at it right now.
What's it at?
59.
If you want to switch it out for Foam Stars, go for it.
I'll
Okay.
think about it.
With that being said, Noah, what have you been playing?
I've mostly been playing Tekken and Star Wars still.
Some good
Games
Tekken.
that I've been playing for it is a good Tekken. It's games I've been playing for a while. Star Wars I'm almost done, which is nice because I've lately been wanting to play Spider-Man, but I don't want to start it until I finish Star Wars because I feel like they are very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I've been playing a lot of Tekken as well. I'm maining Shaheen, but I am thinking about changing my main and learning a new character just because from what I hear he is a very good character, but he also is a little bit of a boring character. Like he's got good buttons, but he doesn't have any gimmicks or anything. So they say he's a great character to learn the game, but he also isn't he teaches you the basics, but I kind of want somebody with a bit more jazz. So I'm thinking about changing to Lars, but I have to first learn how to play Lars.
Yeah.
So
Sounds
yeah,
like gibberish to me, but I do want to play Tekken. Maybe I'll did you buy a digital copy or a physical?
I bought physical because so being in Japan, my PlayStation is still connected to the US PlayStation Store. So when you take in currency conversion, it was a little cheaper for me to buy a physical copy, so I just bought a physical one.
No. Okay. I was gonna try to download it onto mine like I did with Alan Wake, but whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll pick it up when it gets on sale maybe and try it out, but I think I'd rather just spend some time
yeah,
with Street Fighter. But I've
I
heard really good things about it.
yeah, and I prefer fighting games on digital just because I just like popping in and playing them for a bit. And it's a shame where it's like, okay, got to take out Star Wars, got to put in Tekken, and then if I'm playing just a single player game, I can just leave it in my
Yeah.
PlayStation. But yeah, unfortunately, it was a little cheaper for me to buy the physical, so I was like, all right, I'll just do that.
Yeah. Makes
But
sense. Um
yeah,
yeah, I've still just been playing. Oh, were you going to talk any more about Star Wars or no, you're good. You're just
no,
hoping to
not
wrap it up
really.
soon. Yeah.
I'm almost done, so it's like, yeah,
Maybe next
I'm enjoying it.
we'll
I'm
maybe we'll do a fun discussion next week cuz you're pretty close to being done. So maybe we'll do like a full spoiler type of thing and we can dive into the specifics a little bit more without uh
yeah, Star Wars iconic Dreamcast game.
yeah, no, just at
Does
the
it make
end.
the top 100?
Yeah,
Yeah,
just at the end when we talk about what we're playing.
yeah.
As for me, I downloaded the Final Fantasy Rebirth demo. I was gonna try to get to that today, but I was just out running errands a lot longer, so I didn't get to it. But I'm hoping to do that tomorrow, and then I've still been playing Final Fantasy VI on like my lunch breaks. I got to the opera scene, the famous opera scene. And that is a pretty cool scene. I think just given the age of the game, it's not as potent as it was, but it is a pretty cool little section that I think
And
shows why this game was special.
and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they kind of update it as well in this version?
They
I
did.
heard they
They
did
added
something.
yeah, they added I think like voice acting to a certain portion, and I think it works. Like I said, I think the overall like kind of idea gets across. Or they updated the voice acting, maybe I'm not sure, but it's a cool section. I'm still a little. I'm waiting for the game to kind of, I guess, like the plot to really kick in. The characters are just now starting to become a little more three-dimensional, whereas they were pretty one note up to this point. Now we're kind of starting to get them, starting to get their backstories, which I think makes them more enjoyable and that makes the game a little better. So yeah, I'm still really enjoying it. It is classic Final Fantasy, and that's kind of what I like, but it's not one of my favorites just yet. But I heard the second half is kind of when the game really takes off. And then when I'm home, I'm playing Persona 3 Reload, which is that's such a dangerous game to play. It's so easy to just say like, "Oh, I'll just do like one more day," and then the night comes, and then it's a new plot development. So then you're like, "Okay, well, I'll just do one more day," and oh, well, I'm only one more away from maxing out the social link, so I'll just do that. And it's. I played the only Persona game I've played is 5 Royal, and I played that during COVID, and it's the perfect COVID game. Now that it's not COVID and I have other responsibilities, it is just yeah, it's a dangerous game, but it's a lot of fun, and I'm starting to like it more. When I was playing it last weekend, I liked it, but I was like, oh, I don't like the music as much. I don't like the characters as much. I don't like the plot as much. I don't like the dungeons as much. And now I'm like, oh, well, actually, I kind of like the dungeons, and the characters are starting to grow on me, and the music's starting to grow on me. So we'll see kind of how it stacks up to 5 when I'm done with it. But yeah, really cool game. If you like turn-based RPGs, it's pretty good. That being said, all right, Noah, before we get out of here, you want to plug anything?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna plug in that Law and Order clip, the one that is like it's a really great clip. It's the guy and he's like, "Man, I am not gay. I have relationships with women and sex with men." And then Ice-T's like, "And I got news for you. That means you're gay." It's a really great clip. I highly recommend everybody go in and check it out because it's words cannot do this clip justice. So that's what I'm plugging in. That clip of Law and Order where Ice-T tells the dude he's gay. Yeah. Have you seen that clip?
No, I'm watching it right now.
You
Hold on. Be quiet. Oh, it's an ad.
You also might want to make sure that I can't hear it because if it gets uploaded to the podcast, that could spell legal trouble for us,
Oh,
which is
we'll be
ironic because it's a
fine.
police show.
We'll be fine. Can you hear it?
I am not gay.
Yes, I
I
can.
have relationships with women.
Hold on, I want to restart it.
I am not gay. I have relationships with women and sex with men.
And I got news for you. That means you're gay.
He nods his head no, like this fucking guy.
Well,
All
I
right.
think the best part is the "and sex with men" because the way that he says it and his face is like, yeah, this'll get him.
Yeah.
Highly recommend that clip to everybody.
Well, now you don't even have to. I just played it for y'all.
Yep. Well, you gotta watch the clip because the visual is part
That's
of the...
true. The visuals were pretty good. His face and Ice-T just being Ice-T. All right,
Yep.
I'm gonna get us out of here.
Alrighty then.
I think it helps if I turn up the volume of the outro.
Alrighty then, go ahead.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to it. Kind of a shorter one today.
Yeah.
And also, thank you to Pecan Pie on Upbeat for our intro and outro songs. Thank you to Zach Robinson for our logo. And thank you to Gabrielle Esty for our editing. If you liked this, please follow and or subscribe and consider leaving a rating and review so more people can find us. We still want to grow. You can find other episodes of this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, where you can follow along with the history and what has made it on the list and what has not made it on the list. If you want to send us an email, you can do so at gamedisc.podcast@gmail.com, and we will read it on the air. You can send us questions, suggestions, or anything you'd like. And next week, we will see you all again when we talk about a Sega Dreamcast game. And hopefully, unlike that console, this podcast will not be a failure. All right, we'll see y'all next week.
All right. Bye.
After the song, don't stop recording. Why? What are you gonna do?
Okay, this is just a fun little story for tidbit. Anybody that's interested. So, going back to Metroid Fusion, for those of you who don't know, whenever you die, Samus, essentially her clothes get destroyed, so she's just in a bikini. And I remember as a 6-year-old kid, like after the older kids I hung out with saw it, they were like, "Oh, that's so funny, girls." And I was just a 6-year-old kid, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's kind of cool, I guess." Yeah. So yeah, that's my childhood story of Metroid Fusion.
I should have stopped it when the song ended.